Welcome. It has been a while since I've done videos, but I have been requested videos by a classmate, so here you are. Law review. Chapter 2. 1, this video is going to be unedited because I don't have enough time or care enough, and 2, here's a mess. Deal with it. Starting. I don't even need to look at that. I will actually need to look at that. Starting with history of human rights. Laws were first invented by countries to make sure that the country stayed existing. Sometimes they were cruel, like in, I think it was Israeli law or Jewish law. If someone committed adultery, they'd be stoned to death, which was fun. Not really, but you know what I mean. Other cruel laws, such as, I'm not going to look at that because I don't really want to search through this entire time and have empty silence. But mostly, you understand, it was cruel, didn't care about human rights, just needed the civilization to stay in one piece. However, that started to change. For example, in England, the feudal system existed. Lords and people under the king believed the king had too much power. So they forced him to sign Magna Carta. I think it was a king. Yeah, probably. Forced him to sign the Magna Carta to give more rights to the people. The Magna Carta is going to take me a minute to find for some reason. Here it is. Yes. Human rights are a new concept for Canadians. It was usually not that. Canadians believe in a free society. Both gender are not supposed to determine how you are treated in Canada. Today, Canadians want and feel like they deserve a free society, which they do. As in Chapter 1, the earliest codes imposed laws and punishments that most Canadians would consider cruel. These laws were meant to ensure that these societies would survive. Concerns about human rights matters, simply were not an issue. See, point made. Anyways, lords and ladies of the land in England ended up forcing the king to sign Magna Carta and other legislation to give them more power. Eventually, the actual people got the right to vote, and we had a democracy. It was on the way to democracy. Napoleon in France overthrew their government as rights and revolutions. Haha. As seen in this little execution. Yeah. They overthrew the government and formed not really. It was a dictatorship, but it was another step towards human rights and democracy. Eventually, Canada came into place. We had human rights, actual human rights. Again, I recommend you read this over, but that is how human rights were developed. We went slow. Then there was changes to the Constitution in Canada, the Bill of Rights, abolishment of slavery later, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN after World War II, because apparently slaughtering countless people is considered bad. It is. Context. Leave me in context. Don't take me out of context. But yeah. Why am I doing this like this? So they basically passed legislation that everyone has rights. That is shown on this page. Ended up sent to prison camps, a bunch of minority groups and people who were looked down on, and in 1945, world leaders formed a new international organization, the United Nations. Its stated purpose was to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, and it created human rights. Happy, poof, good. John Humphrey made the actual Declaration of Human Rights. He was a Nova Scotian, I think. New Brunswickian. He was Canadian. I don't know what province. Then you have human rights after World War II. It developed very quickly, common law, or not really very quickly, but it developed before thousands of years. We're not in 2077. No, 27,000. But it developed. Yeah. Again, you guys should have read this. But potato, potato, I'm doing things. So, yes. Canadians wanted actual lists of rights after watching or hearing about what happened in Germany. What the hell is that? But eventually we did get that. We got the Charter of Human Rights. No, we got the Canadian Bill of Rights. Do not stop the demands. We got the Canadian Bill of Rights in 1960. So the Bill of Rights could actually be changed, so that didn't really fix any problems. It gave us written rules of what we had as rights, but eventually that had to evolve into something bigger, and we have the Charter of Rights. Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which, yes, here it is, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, to be the most important part of the Constitution Act, 1982. It is the most important part of the Constitution Act in 1982. That is literally when the Canadian Constitution was made, so it was fairly bloody important. Yes, the Charter is entrenched, meaning it's part of the Constitution and needs for any amendment to be made, the federal government and at least 2/3 of the provinces with 50% of the population must agree. The rights and freedoms listed in the Charter are entrenched, so they need that much. They need the federal government to agree. 2/3 of the provinces with at least 50% of the population. That's a lot. So you're gonna keep human rights, yay. However, there is the reasonable limits clause, meaning if your rights violate someone else's rights, you can't do them. And if your rights create a worse society, you can't do them. The Supreme Court judges, or the courts in general, but mainly Supreme Court judges, need to balance individual rights need to find a balance between individual rights and the rights of the society or the community. They are attempting to. It's a little shaky. But yeah, finding a balance between individual rights and the rights of societies, and the good of the society. But yeah. Oh, and having your rights infringed or violated is called having your rights infringed, so that's cool wording. Matters governing the Charter, reasonable limits clause, I discussed that. Notwithstanding clause, provinces can create laws that go against the Charter. However, they only last for 5 years before the notwithstanding clause can be invoked again. Yeah, that is the only way that the federal government got provinces and territories to actually agree that they can violate it when need be. It's not done much, but Quebec did it when, because Quebec's Quebec. If it could, it would be a different nation. Quebec is Quebec. I can't say that on YouTube. The Albertan government is also considering doing it with, transgender people, I think, so that people under a certain age cannot become transgender, or at least not without parent permission, I think. Don't quote me on that. And then we got, yes, this is the one I talked about, the Supreme Court. Rights and freedoms. You have 4 fundamental rights and freedoms. These are called Section 2 of the Charter lists the basic rights and freedoms of all people in Canada. These rights are called the fundamental freedoms, and the Charter divides them into 4 areas. Freedom of conscience and religion, which means freedom of choosing your morality and your religion, basically. You can have whatever morality or whatever God you want, as long as it doesn't involve murdering people, if you didn't know what that hand gesture was. It also has freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. That should be obvious, it's free speech, basically. Freedom of peaceful assembly and freedom of association. Basically, you can protest against the government as long as it is not violent. You can also associate with anyone you want. You could associate with Epstein if he was still alive, but he's not. Also, I don't think you want to. But yeah, you got that. Read the court cases. I'm not doing that. You have a book. Do it yourself. Yeah, that's continued. Democratic rights. Before 1982, you didn't have the right to vote. Okay, you did, technically, but it wasn't entrenched in the Constitution. It could be changed and Parliament could vote on it and yada, 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 yada. But now, it is an undeniable right. Good for you. You also have mobility rights, meaning as long as you are Canadian or a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you can go wherever you want in the country or outside the country. I'm not sure about permanent residents leaving the country. It seems like it would be contradictory. If they're permanent resident, then they couldn't leave. But I'm just gonna go with both. They can move anywhere in the country and leave the country. But yeah, enjoy. Legal rights. These are just your legal rights. Anything that, yeah, criminal code. That's probably not on the test. It says in a different bloody chapter, so enjoy. 15, equality rights. Yes, you cannot be discriminated against for anything. Race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, marital status, color, other things, anything else, basically. Yeah, it says that here. They needed very specific wording, apparently. It was very specific. Yeah. Section 15 of the Charter guarantees that every individual has the right to equal treatment by the law. They are entitled to be treated in particular without discrimination based on race, nationality, or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, mental or physical disability. Sorry, there's a moth trying to eat me. It is important to understand the phrase. In particular, it means that the list does not cover every basis of discrimination, meaning there are other things. For example, you could also claim discrimination on something that is unlisted, such as sexual orientation. Like I said, you can't be discriminated against. That's what that says. Read the case studies. Oh, but this basically says the same thing. This states what the official languages are, and that, yeah, and this basically says you can learn these languages whenever. Meaning, in that court case, that is right below it, because I said you would have to read on your own, but I'm going to do it for you. Basically, there was a group of parents who wanted their kid to be educated in French, but there was no French school. So they contacted the government, asked them to build a French school between the grades of 1 and 6. They said that there was enough people to allow that, basically. You're not going to build a school if there's only one person asking for it. There has to be a suitable number of people, and then the funds to actually build the school are justified. That should make sense. However, the government in this case said no. So they made a suit about it. And they eventually won, and they got the school. Well, the government said that you could go down the road, which is an hour away, each way. So they get a new school, and it was in PEI, so an hour is a lot. Like here, where an hour is just from my house to Starbucks. I don't actually know where the Starbucks is in West Kelowna. It's very nice for you, though. Anyway, Aboriginal rights. It guarantees the rights for existence, though these rights aren't actually listed because the people in government and the people in Aboriginal leaders, or the Aboriginal leaders, could not agree on the rights. What else it says is... It
states that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not interfere with the treaty rights of Aboriginal people of Canada or with land claims.
That is important. Basically, this legislation doesn't mess with Aboriginal people. Hence, part of the reason why it passed. Eventually, the squabbles of figuring out the exact laws were over, and people went over and got more land claims, which is fun. They also got rights to self-government slowly. Several indigenous groups are slowly getting their rights to self-governance, which is good. Well, good depending on how you see it. Mostly good. I think it's good. I don't know what you think. Multicultural and heritage rights. Basically, it says that the Canadian government has to consider the fact that Canada is a multicultural state when making legislation.
Resolution infringement of the Charter. This basically says what happens when your rights are infringed. However, there's a very important point here. In the case, this is a list of what is reasonable in order to use the reasonable limits clause. The first point is it enforces an important government objective. 2, the restriction on individual rights or freedoms is minimal. And 3, the law is clear and sets exact standards. Example, the precise guidance and on material that is considered obscene. This is page 57, by the way. That means it is a list of what has to happen in order for the reasonable rights clause to be invoked. I recommend you write that down and put in your notes. First one has to agree with a important government thing, important government objective. Second one is it can't infringe the rights too much. It's minimal infringement. 3 has to, the law is clear and sets exact standards. This next case study, which again you should read, says that a person sued the government for basically not allowing him to advertise to people below the age of 13. That case failed because, 1, protecting kids under 13 from, say, explicit materials or materials that could manipulate them in some sort of way, propaganda, yada yada, is an important government objective. 2, it is a minimal infringement. I don't know why I breathed like that. Basically, this guy not being able to reach 13-year-olds is not something massive. It's not a big infringement of his rights of expression. That's what this case was. And 3, it was an exact, precise law. Can't advertise, or it's specifically the advertising to children under the age of 13 is a very specific thing. The advertising for children under the age of 13 isn't like banned, but it's heavily censored. Basically, you can't give porn to children. That should be obvious. Yeah, again, read it. Solutions or remedies under the Charter. Strike down and read down. Those are the 2 important things. Strike down is basically removing a law or making it invalid. Read down is saying the law is good, but not in this specific case. As you can tell, I like law. Human rights. Yes, discrimination, stereotyping, and prejudice. Stereotyping is basically applying if you met someone of a specific group once, you apply everything about them to every member of the specific group, or one thing about them to every member of the group, unless it's something obvious like all gay people are gay. That's like not stereotyping, I don't think. Anyways, prejudice is basically having a prejudgment on someone, not based on skill, merit, whatever, just based on random things. It's an argument out of arrogance. Basically, you're looking at what you think about them. It's
Basically, if you think black people are bad, that's both racist and prejudiced. So, yeah. Actually, it's all three. Racist, prejudiced, and stereotypical. Because, never mind. But that's technically, racism might be against the law. But anyways, prejudice and stereotyping aren't. It's only when discrimination becomes in place. Basically, you are treating that person differently. In that case, I didn't catch the bloody thing. I don't think racism is illegal. It's acting on the racism, which would be illegal. Also, the jokes about Landon are... Sorry, Landon. Jokes about minorities and people that you shouldn't be making jokes about are bad. That's what the book says explicitly, so you've been warned. Legal rights legislation. That basically says that provinces and territories use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in their provinces and territories as law. They based their human rights legislation on that. Read it, it's good. Very informative. You can make a claim of about human rights to your government. It does not cost anything. Don't do it unless it actually happened, because that's just an asshole move. And if you do make that, you become the complainant, and the person you're accusing becomes the... I almost had it. Respondent. Recommend you write those down too. And there's a case thing. Then there's more stuff, and then there's looking back. This talks about the War Times Act and Emergency Act. The War Times Act and Emergency Act are the same thing. It's just that the War Times Act came first and basically allowed you to arrest anybody. It was big, that, and cool. Read it over. I barely did. And then the Emergency Act, which came after, limited the power of the War Times Act, made it to geographical places, like could be one city rather than the entire country, as well as had to be passed by Parliament rather than just the cabinet, which it was before. And then there was also terrorism legislation, which happened after 9/11, so that yada yada couldn't happen again. Or to that country, or to our country. Yeah, this was all very argumentative, and the cool thing is it safety and security or liberty that is Canada's top priority? That's basically everything. Good night. I might be autistic. Bye.